That's never not gonna go hard.
I do really enjoy that intro.
Yeah, I mean, whoever made that, what a genius.
Pretty based.
Beautiful.
Anyway, to follow up what we were talking about, yeah, I definitely am sitting on like a lot of money. I only needed about $100 to actually go down to DC, but everyone gave me about 600. So I decided to just keep it. Because I am a broke, starving artiste.
Classic podcaster.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Classic
Understandable.
Twitter warrior.
I hope we get into some YouTube drama at some point. I feel like that's a milestone that everyone.
Oh, I was brewing a little bit the other day. I just didn't engage.
Didn't commit.
More. Yeah, because I didn't really say or do anything. All right. So I don't know if this like conveyed well over text, but the OPE is like like that. That's the sound.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So like,
yeah, it's a Midwest sound.
You got to do the white,
Right.
the Midwest or white people.
yeah, like I don't know if I can brown my face that way.
Oh.
Nah.
I can't even do it, and I'm fucking white from the Midwest. So.
Yeah, what does that say about you, Cruz, and your credentials?
I'm mixed. I'm allowed to do both.
That's
the law.
I like your shark in the background.
That's Santos.
Santos, a comrade.
Santos is a comrade. He's the one that got me into Marxism. Actually,
How'd that happen?
He said, "Bitch, you best pay attention to these books that this guy from 150 years ago wrote." And I was like, "Okay, don't eat me." And that was here I am now making a podcast.
Those sound like some pretty reasonable events.
Some shark behavior.
Glad Santos kept up his end of the bargain.
Oh, he just sleeps now. It's just over there with the fishers mostly.
He's dormant.
All right. So.
Anyway, Cutie, why did you drag us here today? What did you been dying to talk to us about?
Yeah, I wanted to. Oh my gosh, my mic is all messed up. Holy moly. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about, I guess, the national question, or the question of nationalities, or autonomization by Vladimir Lenin. It was like one of his last texts that he wrote before he died. And it's a little bit of a interesting read because he's talking shit about Stalin kind of a lot, to be honest.
Ooh, inter-party drama.
Yeah.
Always.
So you want to just like jump in on reading it? Where did you find it?
I found it on Marxist.org. I can send it to you if you want.
No, I have it ready to.
Okay.
I've got it
roll
as well.
I just want to hear more about like what did you encounter this like previously? Is this something that you went looking for?
I actually, because it was a few weeks ago that I found it. I can't remember how though, to be honest. I think I was looking up something to do with how like the SSRs worked in the Soviet Union, and I found that, and I read this instead of that. You know what I mean?
Classic.
Nice, classic ADHD, neurospicy, communist moment.
I think what it was is while I was looking it up, I found it kind of like I found like another text from Lenin that was like super old, and I was like, I wonder what one of his like last things was. So I actually like scrolled down on like his like the list of things that he had published, or letters that he sent, obviously. And I picked that one because it had the most interesting title, and then I read it, and I was like, damn, this guy's kind of spitting some facts. I've never had a original thought in my entire life. After I read it, I was like, damn, this guy's just saying shit that I was like, you know what? I came up with this. It's not bad,
Yeah, when I read it the first time, I think my exact words was, "Damn, these MFs be cooking." because they were cooking then, they're cooking now. So I guess we can just jump right in and take a look at it and read it and digest together, fellers. Let me share my screen with the homies. Can you guys see it on your end on my
I
screen?
can. Yep.
Oh,
I can kind of see it. Give me a second. Yeah, okay.
Let's see it.
all right, cool.
Now I can see it.
So, Cutie, do you want to read it?
I mean, no, but
I think you got it. You got it.
yeah.
We can trade off.
Yeah, we can trade
We
off.
could,
We can
we could do
trade
the
off.
popcorn reading. All right.
Yeah, I was
so
gonna
I'll
say
read-
y'all did popcorn reading in school, right?
All right.
You know?
So
I'd
I'll-
say we would probably just want to go like line by line and then talk about it and then do an overall. That would probably be easiest.
Yeah,
rather
like what we did
like-
with the Soviet power.
Hmm?
Like what we did with Soviet power. I don't know if you were in that episode.
Oh yeah.
All right, cool. So I'll start. I suppose I have been very remiss with respect to the workers of Russia for not having intervened energetically and decisively enough in the notorious question of autonomization, which it appears is officially called the question of the Soviet Socialist Republics. What did that mean?
I think this is one of those moments where like it just means what it says.
Yeah.
Is that he's just annoyed. I mean, the next section right afterwards, he's just talking about how he's annoyed that basically the party is talking about it without him.
When this question arose last summer, I was ill, and then in autumn, I relied too much on my recovery, and on the October and December plenary meeting, giving me an opportunity of intervening in this question. However, I did not manage to attend the October plenary meeting, which this question came up, or the one in December, and so the question passed me by almost completely. Yeah, bro's pretty mad.
Yeah, he's not there because he's sick. He's recovering, so he missed out on these meetings, and they're asking huge, important questions without him. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah, he's like, come on, guys. I mean, please. Almost like if you guys had done this without me last week.
Right? Since you're the
would've
one
been like-
that brought this topic,
I would have been like, bro, this is my idea. What the fuck?
I started this company. Yeah.
Yeah.
you have any idea what I've sacrificed?
Oh my god. All right, so since Larry, you're very particular about the pronunciation of this comrade, how about you go ahead and read from I have only had time.
This is not the comrade I was
That's
talking
not the
about.
comrade.
This is easy. This is easy.
Oh.
Anyway,
Larry, I can read.
I know it's so big for me to have gained this skill. I have only had time for a talk with Comrade Dzerzhinsky, who came from the Caucasus and told me how the matter stood in Georgia. I have also managed to exchange a few words with Comrade Zinoviev and expressed my apprehensions on this matter. From what I was told by Comrade Dzerzhinsky, who was at the head of the commission sent by the CC to investigate the Georgian incident, I could only draw the greatest apprehensions. If matters had come to such a pass that Ordzhonikidze could go to the extreme of applying physical violence, as Comrade Dzerzhinsky informed me, we can imagine what a mess we have got ourselves into. Obviously, this whole business of autonomization was radically wrong and badly timed. So, what is he talking about here, the Georgian incident? Do you want me to do that, or does
I was gonna say, do you want to explain that?
Okay, so a little bit of background on the Georgian incident. So Stalin and Ordzhonikidze, this Sergo, his guy, his right-hand man, both from Georgia. Both of them agreed that Georgian nationalism was a threat to Soviet power. So when there were some uprisings in Georgia, they both basically took a detachment of the Red Army and went down there and pretty much messed some people up. And as it turns out, once Dzerzhinsky got down there, he basically came to the conclusion that this was a bunch of nothing. It was a bunch of student protests and a bunch of bullshit. So they sort of came down heavy-handed for no reason. That's the genesis of how this letter by Lenin sort of came to be.
There was also disagreements from within, simply because it was carried out by Stalin and Sergo. But at the time, Trotsky was the head of the Red Army, and he had not been informed.
Yeah.
And so a lot of like, hey, I didn't agree to this, and I'm supposed to be in charge of this particular thing. Thoughts on Trotsky doesn't matter. It's just like if he's in charge of the Red Army, he's in charge of the Red Army. So it was done sort of behind everyone's back, and then ended up being way too heavy-handed for what it ended up being. Right. And then Lenin here is like, all right, so we're gonna have to talk about some shit.
Yeah, makes me think, what the fuck, guys?
What are you guys doing?
What is all this about?
It makes me think of just critics of the Soviet Union always talk about paranoia, but it makes me think of paranoia in the sense of how, like, these people really did go through some shit. I mean, to say the least. You know, the fact that they had to experience the First World War and then the Russian Civil War, invasion by British and American and French forces, that like once there was even, some rumblings of dissent, they, I think it's pretty safe to say overreacted.
Yeah. To which I don't know that I would have reacted different personally.
Right.
Like if you go through a decade of just turmoil and then you hear someone mouthing off, you're like, okay, we're not getting back to where we just were.
Right, exactly.
I guess where like a lot of this comes off is almost asking the question for the rest of this this piece is him almost asking the question of like why Stalin and this gentleman or Janakidze can you hear people talking in the background right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
God
like,
damn it, bro.
It's not super loud, but I can hear.
Anyways, I think like son of a gun, bro. I can hear him yapping. Give me a minute.
Yapping. All right. Let's keep reading because we don't know what's gonna happen with him.
Regardless, the incident helped really bring about this question of national autonomy.
For sure. We were at It Is Said, right?
Yes.
All right, Cruz, take it away.
It is said that a united apparatus was needed. Where did that assurance come from? Did it not come from the same Russian apparatus which, as I pointed out in one of the preceding sections of my diary, we took over from Tsarism and slightly anointed with Soviet oil?
I like that a lot because I don't know. Again, maybe I'm misreading it, but it is said a united apparatus was needed. Where did that assurance come from? Like basically saying like we need to be united. Why do we have to be united? We have to be united based off of things that have happened to us in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's just the way I take that.
I mean, that's how I would take it too. It's just like, what is it that binds us together? Like, why do we need to do any of this?
You back home, Slice?
Yeah, I imagine you can still hear people in the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Barely, honestly.
I'll sit up my pillow so hopefully it like blocks it. Anyways, god damn it, bro. Can this motherfucker shut up? Holy fuck. Anyways, okay. So kind of like
to deal with them.
Kind of like to respond to what you were saying, Cruz. Is like almost like asking like if you would have done anything differently. I think like the question he's asking almost like and tries to answer like throughout the whole thing, like all the notes, from beginning to end, right? Is asking if they should treat the nationalism of like, for lack of a better word, like petty or smaller nations
Mhm.
as the same as Russian nationalism and treat them as though they're the same threat. You know what I mean?
Right.
And kind of like describing that, Stalin and Ordzhonikidze in this circumstance treated them exactly the same, and inadvertently actually acted in a Russian nationalist manner that
Mhm.
was counterproductive.
Yeah, it definitely was. I would say the wrong call.
Agreed.
All right, where are we at now?
We're at the there is no doubt.
There's no doubt.
Mhm.
Okay. Are we at oil or are we at there's no doubt, Ivan?
So we read the oil part,
Okay.
and with that, it's just why should we be united? Why? And to what he says there, it's like, did it not come from the same Russian apparatus that we took from Tsarism? And it's like, ultimately the stuff here is the same, and there's memories of Russian bullies and things like that. Like, we got to be careful how we act.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's how I read it.
All right. There's no doubt that measures should have been delayed somewhat until we could say that we vouch for our apparatus as our own. But now we must, in all conscience, admit the contrary. The apparatus we call ours is, in fact, still quite alien to us. It is a bourgeois and czarist hodgepodge. There has been no possibility of getting rid of it in the course of the past 5 years without the help of other countries, because we have been busy most of the time with military engagements and the fight against famine. So, a couple of things there, kind of working backwards. I like that mention the fight against famine, because they're already, again, there's this misconception that the Soviet Union orchestrated, some people say global famine or European famine,
Yeah.
but everyone was having a famine because it was the Great Depression. So, like, they're battling hunger in the Soviet Union itself, and they're engaging in the remainder of military engagements. One, in the Georgian incident, but also I'm sure at the time there were still pockets of dissidents, loyalists, and whatever.
Remnants of the White Army.
Right.
Oh yeah, this is from 1922. So yeah, there's definitely in 21.
It's all new.
Famine.
Right. And I also like this part. It is a bourgeois and czarist hodgepodge. Basically saying, and I don't know, correct me if I'm not cooking, right? But like, that makes me think of sort of like in modern day, like with China, where like China is sort of in this, I would say they're socialist, but they're operating in reality where they have to sacrifice, certain things or principles in order to basically continue existing. When I read this line, it is bourgeois and czarist hodgepodge, I'm understanding that as like, yes, we're this Soviet Union, but we still have a lot of shit from the past, and we're trying to work it out. We're in uncharted waters.
Yeah, I think this is just Lenin describing the situation they were at in 22, where revolution's been one, where they've overthrown the czar, then they've overthrown the provisional government and gone through a civil war, which is quickly coming to a close here, and that there's been no time to construct proper socialism within those couple of years. I think it's exactly opposite of what China is today. In many ways, it's just it more describes what China was trying to do in like 49 to 55. But yeah, it's just that what we've done is we've won this state, we've smashed the state, but we've had no time to be able to build a new state, construct a proletarian state. We've been left with a bourgeois and czarist hodgepodge. So we have the Soviets, of course. What are the Soviets able to actually accomplish in this time as of yet? Well, not a whole lot. We're still working out in this period what this is going to look like, what this is going to be.
Yeah, it's been ongoing war, and like you said, the fight against famine.
Mhm.
And I think a year. So this is 22. You said so.
Mhm.
It would have only been about a year since the NEP was introduced.
Yeah.
So it's in 5 years since the October Revolution.
Mhm.
So they're very much just trying to figure out what to do
Yeah.
with everything going on. And obviously it gets better later, but
And they're certainly still in the process of establishing, people's committees
yeah,
and, various, party organizations. So it's like almost like transitioning control from the military to, regional governments or to,
Mhm.
SSRs or to ASSRs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, it definitely plays into the fact that, they're still very much in a warlord kind of mentality. If you know what I mean, where like,
yeah,
like effectively in this circumstance, right? Like Stalin is acting as a warlord, independent of the organizations of the Soviet Union or the Soviet military. They're
Mhm.
he's essentially deciding to do something with his detachments, without communication with a central body, right?
yeah.
So it's like they're still operating within like a warlord kind of mentality. Like they're still sort of working themselves out of like the Civil War.
Yeah. And I think it's also, as we'll see later as this goes on, it plays and it winds up playing into, to this day, people who still say, well, they were just czarists with red coats on, right?
Mhm.
And it was legitimate that when things happened like that, that the regular people who just are sitting there working,
They're like, how is this any different?
how is this any different right now for us? And in 22, it wasn't. Those material gains were not really being seen yet. So
Baller.
Which I think,
Right.
sorry,
Uh-huh.
but
Go
like
ahead, Kitty.
I think it puts into perspective why like things like the Kronstadt rebellion happened, where like people were becoming impatient and
Mhm.
rebelled, and unfortunately they had to do what they had to do. No, I mean,
This piece and all of this really goes to shows like to anyone that thinks socialism is a utopia or anything like that. Like this clearly shows that they cannot just flip a switch and it starts working. They have to build it from the remains of a destroyed empire. And they use the apparatus that exists while still trying to build their own. And
Mhm.
there's a transition period there.
For sure, for sure. All right. Cutie, you want to bring us forward? Cutie bye.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah, you're muted.
I was muted. I was like, where are we at? It's quite natural.
It is quite natural.
Okay, let me open this up on something where I can see it actually. There we go.
Yeah, I brought it up on the screen for TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah, I just personally can't see it for here. So
Yeah.
it is quite natural that in such circumstances, the quote unquote freedom to secede from the Union by which we justify ourselves will be a mere scrap of paper, unable to defend the non-Russians from the onslaught of that really Russian man, the great Russian chauvinist, in substance a rascal and a tyrant, such as the typical Russian bureaucrat is. There is no doubt that the infinitesimal percentage of Soviet and Sovietized workers will be will drown in that tide of chauvinistic great Russian riffraff like a fly in milk.
Dang. Geez, Louise. So here we're getting into the spice, the sugar and spice, the whole thing. So, who's he talking about?
I think he's obvious. He's talking about Stalin and
It's like he hasn't said Stalin's name yet,
Yeah, the
But-
next sections he starts just being like, you know what, fuck this guy a little bit.
He's like, Stalin. It's very much a Stalin. I love you, but dude, you gotta pull back a little bit.
And I don't want to
force
spoil.
this.
I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a point where he basically is like, I love this guy, but like, we gotta arrest him, bro.
He's not fit for leadership.
All right, I think it's my. Is it my turn? Or no? I went and then Cutie went, right? I don't remember.
Yeah,
Ah,
are
whatever.
we gonna
Did
talk
you want
more
to
you
about
want-
the
that more?
section, or-
Yeah, if you want to lap, go for it.
No, I just wasn't sure if we were like actually moving on, or we like everybody had spoken about it.
I don't know. I'm keeping it open. You know, you have anything to say, Larry?
What is what he's talking about when freedom to secede from the Union? That was something that not everybody was agreed on, and that was something that for SSRs, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Ukraine, Armenia, so on, places that weren't contained within Russia, SFR proper, that had the right to secede from the Union, those SSRs. That secession, what he's talking about here, it's a mere scrap of paper in light of matters right now. There's no way that they have been able to achieve Soviet power consolidated over across the entire former Russian Empire, nor have they been able to codify what that apparatus is going to look like when SSRs want to secede.
Yeah, I think like especially with the fact that with like when you put this in the context of what he's talking about earlier, and also the Russian incident, he's like, or the Georgian incident. To me at least, it seems like he's basically saying that like, what is words on a piece of paper that say you can declare independence if some rogue general within our army can just take his troops against our orders and go and conquer the region or subdue them. Know what I mean?
And say no,
Right.
no,
Right.
can't do that.
It's a really interesting balance, like I said, going back to the them reacting to like all the atrocities that they had been through versus standing on your principles. In Lenin's perspective, they overthrew the czar. They want to be independent. They want justice and freedom and true democracy for everybody else. But then there is a perceived growing rebellion that needs to be crushed. It's crushed, and Lenin feels as if this is a betrayal of their principles, while he's talking about Stalin, and Trotsky being a leader of the military, feeling as if this was something real that we had to actually stop. And it's like, where do your principles come into play when it comes to material reality? It really goes to show that everybody who we look up to is basically at the behest of not their emotions and their material reality of like, this is what I know is correct, but this is what's happening, or this is what's happening and this is my conclusion to it.
Yeah, for true.
Yeah.
Baller.
I'll start the next one.
I cooked too hard.
Okay. So it is said in defense of this measure that the People's Commissariats directly concerned with national psychology and national education were set up as separate bodies. But there the question arises, can these People's Commissariats be made quite independent? And secondly, were we careful enough to take measures to provide the non-Russians with a real safeguard against the truly Russian bully? I do not think we took such measures, although we could and should have done so. and then I'll read this next one real quick because
Yeah. It's connected.
It's tied. I think that Stalin's haste and his infatuation with pure administration, together with his spite against the notorious nationalist socialism, this is not Nazism, this is nationalism.
Not national socialism.
Right, nationalist socialism. This is independent socialist development aside from the Soviets. Stalin criticized the minority nations for not being internationalists because they did not want to unite with Russia. Played a fatal role here. In politics, spite generally plays the basest of roles. So now we're getting into the...
So since it got brought up, it's like the key difference here between like national socialism and nationalist socialism is these countries were becoming socialist, like actually socialist, but didn't necessarily want to be tied to Russia. They're like, we're gonna be socialist on our own. You know, they'll probably trade and shit. But they're like, we're gonna be socialist on our own. We're not gonna join some big union to make decisions for all of us. And that's what the question is becoming at the time. Like, should that be the case?
Right. This also like predates, you know, the Germans, like the German version of it, I suppose.
Yeah, it would have only just been
like
getting.
So, and also it's in quotations. So really what it's just saying is it's socialists that are, you know, they're nationalists. Like
want to be independent, nationally independent from the Russian Soviet project.
Yeah, like today you wouldn't say that, but like there's still people that you know, you would probably call them a national communist or you know, just, you know, whatever their country is plus socialist afterwards. You know what I mean? Like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all sorts of different countries, Cuba. You know what I mean? You wouldn't call them nationalist socialists today because the connotation is completely different. But at the time that he's writing this, that connotation doesn't exist. So
the doctrine of fascism is like 3 years old at this point.
Yeah.
So there's no,
and it's called fascism too. It's not even called. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
that we still got probably a decade before that really becomes the thing.
Yeah, because I mean, don't want to get too far into that, but Hitler they come up with the National Socialist thing as literally Hitler hated that name. Because he didn't want to be
attached to socialism.
But I think getting into this, I really like that Lenin points out that we didn't take the measures to protect the smaller nationalities from the Russian chauvinists, and that they had, and that in his estimation, they had the ability to do so. So he's admitting a mistake, which is, you know, something that we don't always do.
Nope. Can you scroll up just a little bit, Ivan, by the way?
Scroll up?
Yeah, just a tiny bit, just to the section above. Right, just where it goes, it is said in defense of this measure. Yeah. I more meant that at the top, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I wanted to read it over real quick to see if there's anything extra I had to say about it, because I got sidetracked a little bit by the
by the people talking.
No, I got sidetracked a little bit by the fact that we obviously would have to, make a distinction before
Oh yeah,
make a distinction.
I felt like that we needed to address that head on.
Right. All right, Cruz, it's you.
Okay, Larry, you're gonna say the name here though. I also fear that comrade
Dzerzhinsky,
who went to the Caucasus to investigate the crime of those nationalist socialists, distinguished himself there by his truly Russian frame of mind. It is common knowledge that people of other nationalities who have become Russified overdo this Russian frame of mind, and that the impartiality of his whole commission was typified well enough by
Ojanokidze.
manhandling. I think that no provocation or even insult can justify such Russian manhandling, and that Comrade
Dzerzhinsky.
was inexcusably guilty in adopting a lighthearted attitude towards it.
I feel like manhandling would be a really good Discord clip for you.
Manhandling. While my cat is right here.
I think right about this line is where like he legitimately just starts talking shit.
Yeah.
Like above, he's kind of like giving some minor criticism, not minor, but he's giving some like normal criticisms, right? And then right about here, he's like, actually, this guy is an uncle. No, what I mean, he's like,
it's like when you're,
like-
it's like when you're typing like a text message to someone, you're like you're upset with them, and as you're typing, you realize what you really want to say, and it just gets more antagonistic.
Yeah,
for sure. I feel like I don't know. I feel like I got to read this one over again to really grasp the punches that he's not pulling.
Yeah, I mean, I think us, you know, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially what he's saying is that, you know, in this circumstance, Stalin kind of like demonstrated that he is essentially acting in favor of like Russian imperialism as a result of, you know, being Russified. And, you know, he says just like a bunch of you know, ethnicities, people of those nationalities, when they become Russified, right, or that, you know, they become kind of
Overzealous, yeah.
overzealous and assimilated like really aggressively into the dominant group, that they have the tendency to try to force other people of their group to do the same thing. So like, you know, this is talking about the Georgian incident, right? Stalin is a Georgian man. You know what I mean? So Stalin, a Georgian guy, is stopping Georgian people from having, you know, national determination in favor of a more centralized government under a primarily Russian rule. You know what I mean?
and it's important to point out that they weren't even asking for that, right? This was the Georgian incident was not the Georgians all calling for Georgian independence.
Yeah,
they were protesting certain things. There certainly were some people that wanted that, but overwhelmingly so, that was not the case. And that's why this was so bad, is because it was like it's like a kid acting up, and then you kick him down the stairs. You know, they didn't really.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
you can
you're
correct
right.
me. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe anybody was actually killed in this event. But they beat the shit out of a lot of people.
I don't believe anyone died.
They beat the shit out of a lot of students and workers. It was that's what when he says manhandling, he means it. It was rough handling, and it was over basically nothing. It was not over Georgia wanting to become independent and do their own thing. It was over Georgians wanting a voice. It was not, this massive exodus out of the Russian sphere. That's why it was so bad that Sergei and Stalin did this.
And I had a thought, but I lost it. So go ahead.
Sorry.
I mean, I particularly like the part where it says it is common knowledge that people of other nationalities who have become Russified overdo this Russian frame of mind, and you know, it applies like to the United States too. You know what I mean? And to like all these other countries where like, oh, you know, for example, you'll get, you know, the Gusanos, you know, the Cubans that left the revolution are suddenly extremely imperialistic against Cuba, and they want a foreign power to basically dominate the island. You know what I mean?
Or like Ivan, you and me, we're both Latino or Chicano or like whatever you want to say, but like the number of people that I've known in my general family and within that sphere that come over here and then become like diehard Republicans
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
advocating
No.
for border walls and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's all part of, that I, in my past essay, it's all part of the process of Americanization, where, you have people assimilate into American culture, and speaking strictly about American culture in the sense of how America was brought up and founded, is white supremacy. So yeah, you get a lot of people, a lot of Latino Chicano people who come up here who embrace what the American State Department tells them to believe in. You see it with the border wall. You see it for those goobers wearing Latino for Trump shirts. You see it with Latinos backing up Biden, and you see it with Latinos, when they're, especially in the early 2000s, being super racist towards Muslim majority countries after 9/11, because when 9/11 had occurred, a lot of people were able to basically, I don't want to say get in good graces, but essentially like, this is how it goes, right? This is how oppression is. When there's a new group, we can bully the new guy, and I'll rise in the ranks. So now all the hate is on Muslim people and Arab people. So I'm gonna do the same thing, and now I'm gonna make friends.
You really solidify your place within the society.
Yeah. And like you can bring up the example of Irish immigrants to the United States, right?
Yep.
Where they were oppressed for a long period of time. They weren't allowed to get certain jobs here or there, right? And in order to become a part of the accepted state, right, they essentially became cops. You know what I mean? Like they essentially became tools of assimilation on other minorities, and by showing that they were useful in that way, they were then respected. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like they, as he's comparing, I suppose, to Stalin, right? Have kind of become, and I think like Larry said, or Cruz, one of you, that they become overzealous. You know what I mean? Like a little bit too indoctrinated, I suppose, into that type of system, or like mentally colonized. You know what I mean? Where they become basically the same arm and tool of oppression that like once oppressed them, but it's almost kind of like a climbing the ladder and or I guess running through the door and then closing it behind you so nobody else can get in. Know what I mean?
Fuck you, I got mine.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. Fuck you, and I got mine. Yeah, and to back up, kind of, or similar to your example, Cutie, about Irish people becoming cops. I've seen a lot of Latino people join the military or join the Marines, or undocumented people will do that, and then they will get they're promised their citizenship. Doesn't always happen after they do their tours, and they'll go to Afghanistan, or not anymore, but they would go to Afghanistan and fight, for 13 months or whatever, and then come back and boom, you're a citizen. Here's money in college and everything. You're a real American now.
It's like 90% of the people in my family basically did that.
It's terrible. All right, Larry, we got a collab on this one.
You're the name person now, so
We should have had Biba come on here.
Yeah.
for all the citizens in the Caucasus.
Orjanakidze.
Was the authority.
Orjanakidze.
There you go. Had no right to display the irritability to which he and
Dzerzhinsky
referred on the contrary. Should have behaved with a restraint which cannot be demanded by any ordinary citizen, still less of a man accused of a political crime. And to tell the truth, those nationalist, socialists, or citizens who were accused of political crime, and the terms of the accusations were such that it could not be described otherwise. Here we have an important question of principle. How is internationalism to be understood?
Fantastic.
I'm just rereading it again. Which cannot be demanded. I mean, he's basically saying you didn't give these people a choice. You just decided on your own reactionary take that they were committing some grand political scheme or crime or coup, and you decided to act on your own.
They relied too heavily on dictating what these other countries should do and how they should handle their own revolutions, instead of just letting them have their own revolutions.
For sure. What do you think about that, Cutie?
I have to read it over a little bit too. the people that were talking ended up opening the door, and I was like, "All right, guys."
But it's for his ending question is, how is internationalism to be understood? And he's like, well, if let's say you don't like the idea of this nationalist socialist project, it's like, well, how exactly do we go about making it more of an international project?
Right.
Oh yeah,
and it can't be we send our armies in and say you're going to do it this way, because many of these ethnicities have dealt with, as Lenin has said multiple times now, the Russian bully. And because the Russian state hasn't really fully evolved into what the Soviet state would become, all that is still fresh. They're just like, well, and as Larry said earlier, it's more of the same. So it's really the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah. And I think Weiler's question is like very flat, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
I think the implication of his question is closer to is it actually internationalism if we're forcing it on people? Is that
Right.
not just imperialism? You know what I mean? Is internationalism something that has to be coerced out of a particular nation? You know what I mean? Or should it be something that they freely decide to participate in?
Yeah. And I'd also like to point out here in that when he's talking about Orджonikidze being the authority of the whole Caucasus, there was no Georgia SSR at this point. There was no Armenian and Azerbaijani SSR. It was part of the Transcaucasian Socialist Federal Republics. So until the Stalin Constitution in 1936, the Caucasus were sort of amalgamated together into this one big TSSR or whatever the
the acronym
TSCSR or TSCSF. Sorry, and my brain's not working, but this was one of the key complaints that these people had. Like, they wanted a Georgian, we didn't want to be stuck in this confederation of the Caucasus or anything like that.
Right.
There was some of the arguments that the people were having when Orджonikidze basically just said, all of you all shut up, kick you down the stairs. And that's what, something, and to be fair, I think by 1936, under the Stalin Constitution, I think they had figured out a better question for the Caucasus to have those independent SSRs rather than the Caucasus entire thing just being a big amalgamation, which clearly wasn't working.
For sure.
So this whole letter sort of dunks on Stalin in a way, and certainly dunks on great Russian chauvinism, which is correct to do so. But we also have to, if you look through the history, they did get much closer to reaching the correct answers later on. So
yeah,
yes, Stalin did learn from his mistakes,
and this was a mistake.
Yes.
All right.
So, do you want me to go on the continuation of the note?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Are you cool with the Cutie?
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
So this is New Year's Eve. 1922. In my writings on the national question, I have already said that an abstract presentation of the question of nationalism is in general of no use at all. The distinction must be necessarily made between nationalism of an oppressor nation and nationalism and that of an oppressed nation. The nationalism of a big nation and that of a small nation.
This is the part that I read where I was like, I have had no original thought in my life. I read this part and I was like, damn, bro, this guy's spitting. This guy's spitting. He's writing this shit like 100 years ago. Like literally, this is 101 years ago. You know what I mean?
Right.
Side
Almost-
tangent.
almost
That
to the
goes to show
fucking
how it
day,
will always
like
come
almost
back.
to the day, 101 years ago, or 102 years ago, actually. But yeah,
there's
I
a bunch
think
of other fancy words in the next paragraph. You want me to do that one?
I feel like
Fancy
yes, but
words?
also
Oh yeah.
no, but
But
before we go,
continue on. I'm just
yeah. Before we go on, I feel like that is so important for Marxist Leninists to understand. A distinction must necessarily be made between the nationalism of the oppressor nation, the United States,
Yep.
than that of an oppressed nation such as Palestine.
Mhm.
That we must be able to make those differences, that nationalism in the United States as the Americans, as white Americans, is promoting genocide and white supremacy, as opposed to nationalism of countries that are under the boot of said white supremacy, have this urge and this need and this desire to be able to forge their own path. But they cannot have these discussions about what is right for their own societies while they are being starved to death. This goes back to this whole conversation that liberals like to throw at us when they say, well, in Palestine, they don't like gay people, or they're this, that, and the 3rd. Okay, man, but we can't even have that discussion because they're being starved to death after, what is it now, almost 80 days of oppression. I mean, not of just oppression, of an escalation of oppression.
The oppressor nation has the boot on the neck of the oppressed nation and then criticizes them for how they handle their oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think again with this context, it's like, you know, the oppressor has their boot on this nation, right, on this smaller nation, and then they're being like, well, you're not being internationalist enough for us. You know what I mean? It's like, well, who are you? Like, who are you to tell us this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't tell us this.
Who are you guys to tell us about internationalism when like you are destroying our nation? You know what I mean? Like, not that that's what the USSR was doing, but like from the perspective of a minority, like they're not going to give their oppressor the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? They're not like, and he talks about this later. Like they're not going to be like, oh yeah, this is fine. You know, they said they didn't mean it like that. You know what I mean?
right.
Like the important thing is like proving that, you know, they're a worthwhile, you know, experiment. Like it's a worthwhile experiment to be a part of, not like forcing them into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Let them figure themselves out first. Like, don't back off of them. Let them figure it out, and then we'll talk about it later.
So we got a comment on the TikTok that I think is important to discuss, from our one and only comrade Ash. I'm going to read the whole thing, but basically at the end they say, which makes sense why the Trotsky beef partially, because it was their understanding from this original reading that this was more of an argument of why autonomous zones should have autonomy, which isn't necessarily wrong at all. But yeah, exactly, because Trotsky was the leader of the military, and him and Stalin went ahead and they basically fucked up a bunch of dudes for a non-issue. And Trotsky
didn't do it. Trotsky was upset. Trotsky was upset because Stalin and Sergo did it. Yes, did it without consulting Trotsky.
But Trotsky had no problem with fucking up people with the Red Army. So let's be clear about that.
The problem
is not some champion of the smaller nations.
Yeah,
Trotsky
Yeah,
was
right.
worse than
Say-
Stalin in every respect.
In
Tro-
this circumstance, is really just that Trotsky was mad that he wasn't the one that pulled the trigger.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
He's
Right, okay.
It-
So that makes sense. So wait,
that his
hold on.
power had been usurped, or
So-
yeah. Go ahead.
Was Trotsky not the head of military at this point?
He was
He
the
was.
head of the military,
Okay, he was. Okay, all right.
and
So
that's why.
So
why
he's
Judy
even-
was
so he-
saying Stalin was
mhm.
acting a bit like a warlord.
Gotcha. All right, cool. I understand now a little bit better. And it makes more sense, and actually kind of really does reinforce what I'm trying to say anyway, Ash.
Yeah.
That Trotsky's just big mad that he wasn't the one to go down there and basically do it himself.
You should have
yeah,
talked to me first, Stalin.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is in a lot
Get
of
on the
ways
Discord call with
what
us,
he
so.
wanted to do, with the ideas of the permanent revolution, which we don't agree with, because I mean they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
Which we can get into that in another episode.
Right. Oh, right. I think it's my turn, correct?
Are you sure there's some words in there?
Larry will help me.
Okay, go ahead. When you get down to the funny words, just let me know.
In respect to the second kind of nationalism, race card. In respect to the second kind of nationalism, we nationals of a big nation have nearly always been guilty in historic practice of an infinite number of cases of violence. Furthermore, we commit violence and insult an infinite number of times without noticing it. It is sufficient to recall my vulgar reminiscence of how non-Russians are treated, how the Poles are not called by any other name than
Polyachiska.
how the Tartar is nicknamed Prince, and how the Ukrainians are always.
Kokols.
I really wanted to say cuckold, but it wasn't that far off. And the Georgians and other Caucasian nationals always kept Cassians.
Yeah, that one.
See, I got one. I got
You
one.
did it. Yeah.
That's a word I don't recognize. I didn't know that slur.
I try to be up to date on my slurs, and you know what? That one I didn't know.
Just like a Kafkazian.
Just
And
like
I mean,
Napoleon.
this
I'm
is just
calling
like
someone.
more analysis of like how like inherent the how like deep it goes, I guess, for many Russians, right? That they're claiming that they want to be a part of this internationalist union of republics, right?
Mhm.
But they're also looking down on these people as
Mhm.
like lesser nations. Know what I mean? And it kind of again plays into like the chauvinism of being like, well, these Georgians don't know what's good for them. We'll figure this out for them. Know what I mean? Beat the shit out of them and tell them what's up. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
For sure.
It's like we're the big dogs. We know best. You should listen
Bark,
to us.
bark.
And obviously that logic is problematic. And
Mhm.
Lenin is essentially like, hey, I've been there. That fucking sucks. Like, don't do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and you can just apply it to our U.S. conditions. Quite honestly, the great Russian chauvinists are the great white American chauvinists. It's almost a 1-to-1. And really, who needs to be reading this are the patriotic socialists.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I really wanted to, why I like enjoyed it so much, is because of like how much it kind of like,
yes,
is I guess almost in their own way, sort of like deconstructing whiteness, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I can read the next part if you guys want.
Sure.
Go for it.
That is why internationalism on the part of oppressors, or great nations, as they are called, though they are only great in their violence, only great as bullies, must consist not only in the observance of the formal equality of nations, but even an inequality of the oppressor nation. The great nation that must make up for the inequality which obtains in actual practice. anybody who does not understand this has not grasped the real proletarian attitude on the national question. He is still essentially petty bourgeois in his point of view, and is therefore sure to descend to the bourgeois point of view.
Dang.
That
Bro,
was my favorite of the paragraph of this whole thing. He was fucking cooking.
Yeah,
So, Larry?
that's actually this is the first section that I read. It was I read the above and the bottom afterwards.
Yeah,
this was my favorite for sure. Talking about how I guess, for like a lack of a better term, like how they need to prove to these people that they're not gonna do this anymore. You know what I mean? That like just because it's a new economic system that they're gonna that they'll actually help these people, and they'll take the boot off their neck. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Right.
And he's also saying that, in fact, or at least this is my interpretation, that Russia, in this circumstance, the Russian nation needs to actually be lowered below the rest of the other nations as almost like a form of like equalizing, in the long run. You know what I mean? That Russia kind of needs to like take a step back and let the other nations lead. You know what I mean?
To use the boot on neck analogy, not only does the boot need to be taken off the neck, the wound caused by the boot on the neck needs to be healed, and the person wearing the boot needs to effectively
be the one
beg forgiveness and healing them, saying we are going to provide everything we can to make up for what we've done, and until we're all at a point where we are equal, we're not better than you, and we're going to help you.
So this would be like, making special laws for these nationalities, giving them, technically more rights than Russians, because,
affirmative action.
I mean, literally is
Reparations.
It's reparations, like that. Russia needs to take a step back. They need to let these people fucking figure it out for themselves and, join up on their own accord, right?
Mm-hmm.
Russia needs to help them and make sure that they become prosperous nations and not be, exploiting them or oppressing them in the way that they were before. And that to really, really, I guess, put the proletarian dictatorship into like real effect, they need to be doing this. Otherwise, they're not. You know what I mean? They're like failing on their promises to everyone in the country.
And it'll make people lose faith in the project, and it'll just descend back to where it was.
Yeah. And this is something that I would say every socialist experiment so far has had to grasp with to one degree or another. And it's been successful in some cases and less successful in others, but yeah, this one, anybody who does not understand this, does not grasp the real proletarian attitude of the national question, and is essentially petty bourgeois in his point of view, and is still therefore sure to descend into the bourgeois point of view. And that is exactly what I think of when I think about the right-wing opportunists who are calling themselves Marxists these days in the United States, patriotic socialists, MAGA communists, whatever you want to call them. Like we were just discussing today, the people that they try to lionize and who they try to reach out to, like I said, are people like small tradesmen who are petty bourgeoisie, who are not the industrial proletariat here in the States. People like truckers who own their own truck, who are, yes, working class in that they have to work for a living, but they are definitely beholden to a white petty bourgeoisie class character. These are the people that they keep lionizing and reaching out to while they're shitting on service workers and baristas who are objectively industrial proletariat. Like they are part of the chain of labor that, creates and gets the commodity to market. truck drivers and plumbers, tradesmen, etc., are part of that as well, but they hold different positions in that chain of capital. And I think it's just telling where these people are coming from when they keep shitting on actual workers versus people who are definitely in the petty bourgeois frame of mind. They're catering to them.
I think it's pretty crazy that in both of our theory episodes, we end up shitting on Pat socks. So that's a lot of fun.
Love it.
But
Well,
Keep
it,
it up.
it needs to be
the
done.
shit on them.
Yeah.
no, and I know.
It's just one of those things where they claim to be the same thing as we are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
naturally
exactly.
we're gonna be, more aggressive towards them. Like if
Right.
if there were, anarchists, know what I mean, claiming to be Marxists, then
Right.
I'm sure we would be more aggressive with them too.
Yeah.
But it's just like what's the point in arguing with somebody who doesn't agree with you on the basics, at least in their own words? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
We're not gonna be talking a whole lot of smack about right wingers, because obviously if we're talking smack about our own people having slight right wing tendencies, no shit, we don't like legitimate right wingers. You know what I mean? So there's no point.
We don't have to explain that we don't like the people that far to the right. We don't
right,
tolerate
right.
It's because we hold
little deviations.
because we hold people who are a part of the movement to a higher standard than fascists. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, know what I mean? I'm I'm sorry if it sounds harsh to get criticism from somebody that you claim to be a part of the same movement, but it's
Yeah.
in this circumstance, if you are a part of the movement and you're trying to liberate the proletariat, and you end up deciding to invade this area, or not invade because it was already under their control, but if you decide to essentially against Red Army command and all sorts of shit like that, you decide to oppress this nation, we're gonna fucking criticize you. Obviously,
Mhm.
if it were the opposite and this was the czarist, the White Army had won, no shit, they're gonna be oppressing all these countries.
Yeah.
The problem is that the people who claim to be on the same side as us are doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I
you have to
think,
call that out if the movement fails.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I want to call out about that paragraph, harkening back to what Larry was saying, anybody who does not understand this has not grasped the real proletarian attitude to the national question. Yeah, and I feel like that can be directly addressed, of course, to the Pat Sox, but for baby leftists too, who believe that if we simply change the mode of production, slap a communist label on the United States, that the United States can, one, somehow continue to exist, and two, can still hold the role that it does in the world. Because people who believe that believe still that the United States is objectively the most good, is trying their best. There's just a little bunch of small guys, who make some mistakes instead of being the world empire. That's why we say it has to come down, because it cannot continue to go this way, because we do not hold this vanguard role in real life. We are the oppressor of nations. And if you cannot grasp that, you cannot be a Marxist.
And this is why it's important to study not only history, but theory, because a lot of the same debates, questions, arguments happened 100 years ago, as we're discovering here. We don't say it as eloquently these days. It's usually memes and shit posting, but this is the equivalent.
Right. Exactly. All right, boys. Let's power through here. Whose turn is it?
Whose turn is
I mean,
Okay.
I can read this one too if you want.
I was going to say, I'll just start reading if you don't.
it?
What is important for the proletariat? For the proletariat, it is not only important, it is absolutely essential that he should be assured that the non-Russian place the greatest possible trust in the proletariat class struggle. What is needed to ensure this? not merely formal equity, or is that equality in one way or another by one's attitude or by concessions. It is necessary to compensate the non-Russians for the lack of trust, for the suspicion and the insults to which the government of the dominant nation subjected them in the past. Bro always talk about reparations.
Yeah. Like straight up, there's no alternative. Like he's just saying, we got to make up for the shit that Russia did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Yeah, I think I'll just carry us to the end, and then we'll have a. Do you guys want to keep going, or you want to end it at this paragraph?
I mean, that's the last section right after this.
Okay.
So like that second continuation of the notes, that's the last one. If you want, we could probably do like 2 lines at a time, so it goes by a little bit quicker.
Okay. I think it is unnecessary to explain this to Bolsheviks, to communists in greater detail based. And I think that in the present instance, as far as the Georgian nation is concerned, we have a typical case in which a genuine proletarian attitude makes profound caution, thoughtfulness, and a readiness to compromise a matter of necessity for us. The Georgian, Stalin, who is neglectful of this aspect of the question, who carelessly flings about accusations of nationalist socialism, or he himself is a real and true nationalist socialist and even a vulgar great Russian bully, violates in substance the interests of the proletariat class solidarity, for nothing holds up the development and strengthening of the proletariat class solidarity so much as the national injustice. Offended nationals are not sensitive to anything so much as to the feeling of equality and a violation of this equality, if only through negligence or jest, to the violation of the equality by their proletarian comrades. That is why, in this case, it is better to overdo rather than underdo the concessions and leniency towards the national minorities. That is why, in this case, the fundamental interest of the proletariat class struggle requires that we never adopt a formal attitude to the national question, but always take into account the specific attitudes of the proletariat of the oppressed or small nations towards the oppressor or great nation. Boo, 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 boo.
This is like this section right here is like a little like the meme where it's the music video where he's writing on a piece of paper and the fucking house is on fire. Like he's just
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like he's spitting. You know what I mean?
I just love that the way he calls out Stalin. He's just like the
The
Georgian in the Georgian incident.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what are you doing, dude?
He's literally saying like white guy moment.
He's like, hey, and like we said kind of at the beginning, he's like, buddy, I love you, but dude, come on, use your brain. That's not cool.
Right. And this, again, plays to today where we see we don't have a socialist republic sitting around us, but we're communists and we have our organizations. And how many times, I'm sure people watching and listening, how many times have we been, well, I can't say myself because I'm a white American dude, but how many times have our comrades been bullied over and talked over by white dudes or white women in our communist organizations?
I mean, it's literally what we just opened the bit with.
Yeah, exactly.
White man,
It's like it literally happened on TikTok recently.
Yep. and you know what? I can't, like, that's even worse. Like, Stalin and Sergei just roughed some people up. They didn't rip anybody off.
Right.
You're like, at least Stalin was from the place.
Yeah. Good Lord.
Yeah, neither one of them were Palestinian anyway.
Up. Or in the words of Ivan,
Oh.
That was so stupid, guys. I was like, what do I even do? Like,
don't go talking over Palestinians, you fucks.
Larry, people can change, bro.
Yeah, people can change. Absolutely.
1 second.
Yeah, they sure can. Except for they're not interested in doing that. So, you know, because I would definitely like that 12,000 bones. Anyway, should we not unmute? Let's not mute Cruz. I want to hear what's going on over there. Anyway, so let's keep it going. Continuation of the notes. What practical measure must be taken in the present situation? Firstly, we must maintain and strengthen the Union of Socialist Republics. Of this, there could be no doubt. This measure is necessary for us and is necessary for the world communist proletariat in its struggle against the world bourgeois and its defense against bourgeois intrigues. Is that how you say that? Intrigues. Secondly, the Union of Socialist Republics must be retained for its diplomatic apparatus. You and his nose blowing, bro. By the way, this I think episode
That threw me off so bad.
has the most random background sounds. Like even I think compared to our first episodes, like there's just all kinds of tomfoolery going on.
I have a giant nose that makes noises. I'm sorry.
By the way, this apparatus is an exceptional component of our state apparatus. We must not allow a single influential person from the old czarist apparatus into it. All sections with any authority are composed of communists. This is why it has already won for itself, this may be said boldly, the name of a reliable communist apparatus purged to an incomparable greater extent of the old czarist bourgeois and petty bourgeois elements than which we have had to make do in our people's commissarists. Yeah, so basically what he's saying is if you want in on the club, you got to actually like do the homework. You got to work, bitch. Like you can't just be a former member of the bourgeois. You can't just be some random, politician. Like you have to be a staunch, like you have to be a communist, and you have to live and abide by those principles. And again, I feel like we say this every episode. And again, going back to the drama and the Georgian incident and everything that's been going on, if you do not have correct principles, you will always make these mistakes. And we're all bound to make. Right. And we're all bound to make some kind of mistakes. But if you are true to your principles, then the likelihood is even less. And the extent of that mistake will not be nearly as great.
Yeah. And just look at what eventually happened when they, because they, and there's a million things that happened between there and then, but allowing, people like Khrushchev, who came from the peasantry class, who definitely was not a proletariat, who had a petty bourgeois attitude, and he opened up. He and his clique opened up the party. That it became not the constitution for the party for the proletariats. It became the party of the whole nation of whole peoples. Complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Complete nonsense.
It was no longer run by Marxist-Leninists. It was
and it was no longer run by people with the proletarian class interest in mind. It started becoming, well, at that point, great Russian chauvinism, whether that was working class or petty bourgeoisie, which we saw the petty bourgeoisie being allowed in, and they destroyed the whole thing. So that's how dangerous this can be for these movements. You have to be firm in your dedication to proletariat and Marxist principles. It's of the utmost importance. I mean, China has been able to hold it together, but while still allowing some bourgeoisie into the party. But that's
a risky game.
It's a huge risk, and it remains to be seen if that works out in the end. I don't know, but we saw how it worked out in the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, it did not. It destroyed it from within.
Yep.
So it's that serious when we talk about this stuff.
If you want, I can read the next two sections.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So, thirdly, Exemplary punishment must be inflicted on Comrade Orjonikidze. Cool. I say this all the more regretfully as I am one of his personal friends and have worked with him abroad, and the investigation of all material which Dzerzhinsky commission close enough
Close enough.
commission has collected must be completed or started over again to correct the enormous mass of wrongs and biased judgments which it doubtlessly contains. The political responsibility for all this truly great Russian nationalist campaign must, of course, be laid on Stalin and Dzerzhinsky. I think I'm getting better. Fourthly, the strictest rules must be introduced on the use of the national language in the non-Russian republics of our Union, and these rules must be checked with special care. There is no doubt that our apparatus being what it is, there is bound to be, on the pretext of unity in the railway service, unity in the fiscal service, and so on, a mass of truly Russian abuses. Special ingenuity is necessary for the struggle against these abuses, not to mention special sincerity on the part of those who undertake this struggle. A detailed code will be required, and only the nationals living in the republic in question can draw it up at all successfully. And then we cannot be sure in advance that as a result of this work, we shall not take a step backward at our next Congress of Soviets, i.e., retain the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics only for military and diplomatic affairs, and in all other respects restore full independence to the individual people's commissariats.
I especially like the part where he says a detailed code will be required, and only the nationals living in the republic in question can draw it up at all successfully.
Mhm.
And sort of saying that, like, you can extrapolate, I guess, to, like, the United States would be like, a indigenous constitution for, like, a their own republic or republics,
Mhm.
right? Or for Black people, or for Latino people. No, I mean, like, it can't be written up by a white guy. It's got to be written up by the people that the Constitution is meant to be for. Know what I mean?
Right.
And it's kind of crazy, like you said, Cutie, earlier, how like we never had an original thought, because like I feel like a lot of my Chicano content is pretty on par with this, where basically I'm saying like we as a national identity have to start taking charge of our political affairs and not let white liberals dictate who and what we are. Um, and even so, members of the Chicano community, such as like AOC, like have no place to tell us who and what we are, because they serve the bourgeois. Um, so yeah, dang, I'm like you. I've never had an original thought.
Yeah.
All right, I will read the end. It must be borne in mind that the decentralization of the people's commissariats and the lack of coordination in their work as far as Moscow and other centers are concerned can be compensated sufficiently by party authority. If it is exercised with sufficient prejudice and impartiality, the harm that can result in our state from a lack of unification between the national apparatuses and the Russian apparatuses is infinitely less than that which will be done not only to us, but the whole international and to hundreds of millions of people of Asia, which it is destined to follow us on the stage of history in the near future. It would be unpardonable opportunism if on the eve of the debut of the East, just as it is awakening, we undermine our prestige with its people, even if only by the slightest cruelty or injustice towards our own non-Russian nationalities. The need to rally against the imperialists of the West who are defending the capitalist world is one thing. There could be no doubt about that, and it would be superfluous for me to speak about my unconditional approval of it. It is another thing when we ourselves lapse, even if only in drifts into imperialist attitude towards oppressed nationalities, thus undermining all our principled sincerity. All our principled defense of the struggle against imperialism by the morrow of the world history will be a day when the awakening peoples oppressed by imperialism are finally aroused and a decisive, long, hard struggle for their liberation begins. Lenin. Dang, bro. I feel like
Cooking.
cooking, gas, Zaza. I really like it is another thing when we ourselves lapse, even if only in tribes, into imperialistic attitudes. Basically, he's saying like even amongst ourselves, if we're beefing, even if it's small beefs, we got to call it out because we're not abiding by our own principles, and letting that seed fester is what's going to cause a lot of problems down the line, as we saw with the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah. And he's speaking also here. You notice how he says the debut of the East fighting against Western imperialists. They already were long past the despite what Trotskyists might say, they were long past the idea that anything was going to happen revolution-wise in Europe, right?
Yeah.
By 22. So they were making an example for China, for the East, for India. These nations were struggling for independence from the West in fighting for their own
self-determination,
freedom and self-determination from Western imperialism. That's who they were. That's what the Soviet Union. It was the debut of socialism, but it was also a show to the East of look how much we can do against our shared natural enemies in the West. So if we fuck this up, the people in China who are struggling for it right now, the people in India who are struggling for it right now, as in 1922, are going to lose heart, are going to, not trust us in the future, if we fuck this whole thing up. So there was a lot on the line, is what he's saying here.
I think it also really demonstrates that, or not demonstrates, I suppose, but sort of comments on the fact that if in the first socialist country ever, right? Shut the fuck up, dog. In the first socialist country ever, right? They oppress, the nationalities that they're supposed to be uplifting. It kind of destroys the credibility to oppressed nations abroad. You know what I mean? That they're less likely to want to participate in, cooperation with that country, and they're less likely to participate in socialism in general. So when he's saying on the eve of their awakening, they have an opportunity to prove that the awakening is worth happening. You know what I mean? It's worth participating in this and the global revolution. But if they fuck it up, they might fuck it up for millions and millions of fucking Chinese people or Indian
sets everything
people.
back.
Or it sets everything back, and it kind of really resets.
It's like
Russia,
Russia,
you know what I mean?
They were the first, and they had to show the way forward. And like you said, that's a huge responsibility, right? That's a intense place to be.
Yeah. They had to be the vanguard for the world revolution, but in a way that wasn't imperialist, in a way that showed that they were actually the opposite, that they were a liberating force, and that they weren't there to force you to now join in this global revolution. It was we're a part of this, and we're gonna keep doing it. You should join because it only benefits you.
Right.
We
will help.
We will help you. For sure.
Let's also ultimately, as he said this, he was proven right. And honestly, his idea of showing the way is the proper path towards permanent revolution, is simply showing the way and helping when they could, because they did. I mean, they did succeed in that. They absolutely showed the people and helped the people in China win their revolution eventually.
Yeah.
I think it also goes to show that how pervasive and how Marx-Leninist principles really how do I phrase this? They're beyond time. Like these people are considering, Lenin in particular is considering the implications of millions of people, not in that's going on the soundboard, and not only 10 years but 100 years from now. They're thinking about what the face of the earth is going to look like, what is human culture going to be experiencing, how can these people become truly liberated, and our ideology that we are trying to sell them, to convince them that it is the way forward, the way for liberation. I don't know, and I think that goes to show again just how much more important principles are.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
I think this actually is probably one of my favorite things that I've read, to be totally honest. Pieces of theory based.
I've
Just
never
because
read
it's
it.
from over 100 years ago, and it's just like it's like this
resonates.
motherfucker's like what is it?
Nostradamus.
Nostradamus. Yeah, he's like the fucking the Oracle of Moscow over here, like telling the
Yeah.
future. Like it's wild.
I mean, we were able to relate it to our own material conditions here in the United States very easily, and it still all applies and makes sense. But before we finish, I kind of want to ask a question that popped in my head.
Sure.
So this was largely directed at Stalin, and that's pretty clear. And yeah, obviously Stalin was essentially like Lenin was a mentor to Stalin. So Stalin definitely took this to heart. I'm sure whenever Lenin called him out, he was like, "Fuck, I disappointed Dad." Right? Dad's mad. I'm a piece of shit. Do you think, and for the people watching, do you think that Stalin learned his lesson here? And how did he take the lesson? How did he take those lessons and apply them to future endeavors, especially when he became the overall leader?
I'd say that yeah, I agree with Larry, because like I'd say that he really did a combination. I don't think he ever really like fully got rid of the Russian chauvinism. Because of the fact that he, basically reversed the Latinization campaigns for languages that would have made it easier for people to read in favor of, preserving, the Russian script, which was notoriously much more difficult to learn how to read than Latin, right?
Yeah.
And also you can see this in how he acted towards countries in the Soviet periphery, with like the Baltic countries, you know what I mean, with like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, that it was a little bit more hands-on than it was collaborative. You know what I mean? Like there certainly were Estonian communists and Finnish communists and et cetera, but it was a lot more we're going to decide this for you, and then we'll let you have a choice after the fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to the Baltics too, I think the experiences of World War II played so much into that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think, yes, by the time, but World War II really was such a turning point, and it changed so much for the Soviet Union entirely. Just what that does when you lose that number of people and you go through that shared trauma, it changes the character of the nation. And there was a popular sentiment after that war that it was not proletarian revolution so much anymore, and it was, look how strong we are as Russians who have defeated the Nazis. That played a big part in things. But I think if you look at the 1930s, when you see the Stalin Constitution and you see when Georgia and Azerbaijan, Armenia, etc., were actually, by the time they had actually created the proper SSRs of the former Caucasus Federation, Stalin was staunchly for all of those SSRs being created rather than being stuck in one big conglomerate of the Caucasus, which was silly. So yeah, I think he learned and then he didn't learn. Yeah, he was still a great Russian chauvinist his whole life. I mean, that was just something that he never unlearned. But he, in applying it to practice within the Union, yeah, some yes, some good, some bad.
He learned. I would say he definitely learned from it, but the conditions that followed later on definitely, shaped him as well. So like you said, it's hard to come out of World War II and not be
it almost it doubles down on the trauma.
Yeah, and I don't think that we should. Yeah, for sure. Trotsky never even.
He didn't bother.
No, he didn't. But I don't think we should associate like Stalin with like dictatorial rule where he would have really had like the decision to like do all of that.
Yeah, it wasn't just him.
Like he was.
It's the
like it's just because Russians were a large part of the population and just how elections work in any system. You know what I mean? The dominant people tend to get what they want, which is really the genius of having a national Congress, like for the nationalities, so that way they have the ability to defend themselves if need be, like legally. You know what I mean? In the event that a majority begins to oppress them, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that obviously there were going to be a lot of other Russian chauvinists in the party. You know what I mean? And they wouldn't have too much disagreements with Stalin. Stalin was probably one of the least chauvinist of the Russian chauvinists, but certainly still a Russian chauvinist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think too, I agree with you. We couldn't hold Stalin into like this dictatorial, whatever, fall for that kind of liberal propaganda. But putting more in context of what Lenin is saying is like you said, Lenin mentored him. It would be like if Cruz did a collab video with Rathbone, and then I would make a tag, a reply to him and basically be like, "Bro, what are you doing?" Not that I mentored you, but that's just my shitty.
I don't know, man. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I didn't know he was gonna go off like that.
He's in Dubai, yeah. Uber in Dubai.
And we have to understand too that it's not just about Stalin, but what the entire Americans in general don't have any idea of how the Soviet Union was organized. You had the Union itself, then you had the Soviet republics like Belarus and etc., which Kazakhstan, people have heard of those. But then you also had autonomous oblasts and autonomous okrugs. So you had a ton of divisions, and these were, they put this together. By 1936, it was really solidified, what all of these things were and how they would behave. And it was an experiment. They were doing this. They were coming up with this as they went. There had been nothing like this beforehand. So it was Soviet democracy, and how this was all put together was completely flying by the seat of their pants. Marx did not tell anyone, you have to.
This is how you organize
things this way and this way. And obviously those of us who know anything about Marx know that he wouldn't do that. But it was, it's always an ongoing process. And in many ways, they learned from their mistakes in the early, revolutionary period. And they unfortunately repeated a lot of them later on. So.
Well, in conclusion, Yeah.
No, I was about to be like, yeah, I think we're done. I think we did it.
It's like I feel like
Yeah.
that was a good part to end on right there.
We've done
Yeah.
it.
All right, babies. Bye.
Love y'all.
Bye.
Good night.